WTF, we're doing a podcast. I'm Nikki.
And I'm Michelle. This is 50. Welcome to What the 50. Join us on our continued journey to simplify our lives.
We will seek the answers from the experts and offer tips, tools, and techniques to live your life with confidence and joy. Are we ready?
Let's go.
So here we are today, another episode. And as we know, we mentioned it before, this is Adoption Awareness Month in Jamaica. And for various reasons, adoption isn't really spoken about a lot. It's almost taboo. I think we're getting a little better with it now, because I actually have a few friends who have adopted children. They're young children. And I have a friend who's going through the process. It's been a very difficult process for her, though. But recently, I met a young lady who I just totally fell in love with. And I just thought it would be great for us to have a chat with her. Her experience is just heartwarming. And I think we can learn from her and, just hear her journey and get the conversation going about adoption.
Of course.
Yeah.
So and it continues on in our family month, right? Because adoption is now a different form of a family, but your family nonetheless. And I'm glad that celebrities are doing it. So, it's making it the norm for sure. So that more and more people, it's just commonplace that this is your family.
Right.
So we will have Stephanie. So Stephanie was born and grown in Kingston and pursued her first degree overseas in the United Kingdom in Sociology and Psychology. And of course, she graduated with honors. Loving Jamaica and family as she does, she returned to Jamaica as soon as she attained her degree and had aims of doing her master's in social work. Her career with working with the disabled community, and particularly the deaf and hard of hearing, ended up choosing her. And just like her story began, it continues as she is always chosen and continues to obey her calling.
Stephanie McIntyre Groves is now the founder and CEO of PA, and her tagline is Bridging the Gap. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about PA when we start to have our conversation. So along with her husband, Kamar, he's a co-founder, they aim to narrow the space between the deaf and hearing community by providing courses in Jamaican Sign Language and deaf culture to corporate entities and to the public interpreting services, consulting services, and one-on-one tutoring. As an entrepreneur, educator, interpreter, advocate for the deaf and hard of hearing, and public speaker, Stephanie aspires to continue to be a change agent and motivate others to do the same.
Pretty impressive. And I think that when our listeners hear her enthusiasm and really her energy that just exudes from her, they'll fall in love just as we have.
Yes, we did. Yeah, for sure. And we're so excited to have Stephanie, and we're always excited to have our guests. But today is extremely special because, as we mentioned before, it's Adoption Awareness Month. And we actually have an adoptee as our guest today. And Stephanie, I always say this, right? But Stephanie is looking extremely beautiful this morning. She always looks beautiful, but she's really looking radiant today. I wish our listeners could see her. But Stephanie and I met some time ago, and in our exchange, realized that we had quite a few things in common. And I just thought she was just a beautiful soul. And it's such a pleasure to have you on today, Stephanie. And we know that we're in for a really interesting conversation.
We saw your bio and it was like, wow, so impressive. So we hope we get to talk a little bit more about all that that's on your bio, because that.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. The excitement level is really high.
Great. So a few weeks ago, Stephanie was actually on television. She was a guest on a show that talked about adoption. And Stephanie shared her story, which was extremely touching. I got goosepimples listening to her story, which was just absolutely beautiful hearing it and seeing the emotion that was on Stephanie's face as she told the story. And a little part of it, we actually saw her mom, which was, that's when I think I had to call for the Kleenex. And I'd love for you to share your story with us. Tell us what it's like to be an adoptee.
Okay, with pleasure. Right, so of course, as we've said, my name is Stephanie, and I'm adopted. So my story began so early. I was adopted at 4 days old. So I was this little pink baby with lots of hair. And my very first picture is a picture of me in like a little basin with, I think it's towels, and me kind of just like keeping up, like, where am I? Who am I? What is going on? You know, I love that picture. Anyway, so it starts there. And being adopted was something that I felt like I always knew. I felt very confident about it. And this is coming from, of course, my parents. So my mother and my father are different complexions, myself, different ethnicity. You know, my mom is European, and my father is what we call, you know, brown Jamaican from Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, you know. And, you know, so very early on, I think there were a lot of questions, you know, but from my experience, I don't think as a child, you know, adults would ask me anything in particular. But I remember very early going to, for example, kindergarten and being, you know, very confident about, my name is Stephanie, I am adopted, I am 4 years old, I am this, I'm my favorite color, you know, that kind of thing. So that's kind of, you know, in the process of growing up, I feel like developmentally, I, you know, was afforded the same things that a lot of children who are not adopted were afforded. However, you know, questions didn't really come much until, you know, later in prep school, where, you know, I've shared before that I can recall a lot of children saying to me, you know, your mom, we don't know what she is, your grandmother, your aunt, your something, you know, is here. And, you know, over time, at first, it's like, oh, that's my mom, you know, and I remember being a little annoyed, like, isn't it obvious to you? But it really wasn't. And over time, persons, you know, would even correct other people who would call my parents something different. Grandma was definitely a common one that, you know, I'm so glad that over time, people just learn that, listen, this is her mother, and this is, you know, this is just what the situation is. Yeah, but my parents, especially my mom, but both parents were always really front and center in my life and in explaining who I am. You know, I have had family members who at times would say, oh, this is Mike and Brenda's adopted daughter. And, you know, my parents would be like, wait, you know, yes, this is my daughter, you know. But, you know, you would see the little, you know, like, no, let's correct that, you know. And so very early, I was very, you know, open about it and front and center about it, you know. And I really feel like that's something I want to share, because I'm aware, and the older I've gotten, I'm aware that everybody's experience is not really the same. You know, so that's kind of how it was. I feel like, you know, I'm so blessed and so lucky. And lucky is a word that, you know, sometimes I feel we have to be careful with, but really it's the way it kind of all aligned. You know, my parents were thinking about it, but just didn't quite take the jump. And then just one day, it was like, oh, there was a baby born yesterday. Are you interested? That kind of thing. Mommy has told me things like when she saw me for the first time, she didn't know if I was a boy or a girl, but whatever that umbilical cord thing must feel like, it's like, that's my child. So when I say lucky, that's kind of in terms of the alignment of how kind of smooth the things happened for them. Just really blessed and just so grateful for that.
Openness, the communication that your parents had with you, the way that they claimed you as their daughter, would you say that made a difference for you in terms of being confident? Because I've read stories where adoptees tend to they're not quite sure who they are, where they belong, why they're in a family. They may not necessarily feel accepted in that family. So do you think your parents being very definitive and saying, this is my daughter, Stephanie, do you think that made a difference for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, them being front and center, claiming who I am, explaining who I am, not only to me. So that openness of communicating with me, whatever they knew,
Right.
very early was just so, it's very, very important, I think, in the confidence that I now have. And don't get me wrong, there is a lot of doubt that is there at times. I think there are definitely moments that I've constantly had to work on my self-worth. And do I belong?
Right.
But that's like kind of the power of, we do affirmations all the time, but sometimes I think parents do it without saying, okay, this is an affirmation, because I can go back into my brain and say, no, you do belong. You deserve the same things that everybody else in your family and other children.
So based on what they did, they set the tone for you and for the rest of the family. But you mentioned earlier, before we actually came on air, that they gave you a card with the adoption creed on it.
Yes, the adoption creed.
You want to tell us about that?
I do. I really want to. So when I knew I was, preparing to come on here today, I instantly remembered an adoption creed card that my parents gave me. I cannot remember what age, but it does say to Stephanie from Mommy and Daddy, not flesh of my flesh, nor bone of my bone, but still miraculously my own. Never forget for a single minute, you didn't grow under my heart, but in it. It's powerful, and I've kept it, and it meant something to me. I really feel I was probably about 6 or 7 there. So, and I hope to share that with just to anybody listening and watching, that these are little things that maybe we should really try and research and see how we can reassure. Yes, sure. Reassure adoptees and children who have been adopted.
Right. One of the things with adopted families is perhaps as a outsider being new to something like adoption, is how to let's say politically correct way of referring to people, various people in the families. So my sister-in-law is actually adopted.
Okay.
And I remember speaking to her one day when I had first found out, and saying something about her real parents, meaning her biological parents. And she said, no. My parents are my real parents. So maybe could you talk a little bit more about that and how that all feels to you and how we should refer to different people?
Sure. So yeah, I can relate to that, what your sister-in-law experienced. And I've gotten that question many times. Do you want to meet your real mother? And how does it feel not being raised by real parents? And you do kind of feel instantly defensive, I think, because as an adoptee, you're just so, you do realize, I think your perspective is different. You realize what has been, for want of a better term, given up what your parents have done for you, and so you kind of want to correct it instantly. So yeah, in terms of real, the persons who raised you, I can speak for myself, but I feel that they're your real parents. And those who have contributed to the birthing process are like either your biological, or some people will say birth parents. That's also quite acceptable. Yeah, so we generally don't either say like adopted mom, my adopted father. We usually just say my mother or my father.
Perfect.
Yeah, and yeah, so that's just kind of one of the various things that you go through being adopted. Another one is kind of when people approach you sometimes, I can speak for myself, it's better I do, where they would say things about like how you look, like your appearance. There's so many people, like right now I'm having to care for my mom, and she's aging, and there are many medical conditions that she's having to live with, and so it's been very difficult. And a lot of persons, because they see me up and down at the hospitals and the pharmacies, many people say, oh, I can't wait, I'd love to see what your mom looks like. And instantly that kind of goes, I kind of think, well, she's not going to look like me, just so you know. But sometimes I go, well, yeah, I'd like to know what my birth mother looks like too. There's that curiosity there. But sometimes I share that, listen, she won't look like me, and then sometimes I just don't bother to say anything. But sometimes those are little questions, or little things that come up as an adoptee. You kind of know that your situation isn't the same as everybody else's, and you're aware of that sometimes when people ask questions. But I would encourage people not to necessarily be too shy about that. I think the only way, like you did, is just to ask recently, just what should we say, because that's the only way. I really feel like communication, open communication, even if it hurts a little or stings a little, that's a part of life, and learning about people, learning where we come from, learning how to navigate this crazy life, and just learning about variation, and because that's life.
So in Jamaica, Stephanie, the topic of adoption is, I hesitate to use the word taboo, but I recognize that it's not really spoken about. And when I watched the episode with you and Cheryl Baker, who is a friend of mine also, it was pretty obvious that the conversations are just starting. Persons are not really speaking about it. Persons don't know about it. You know that it happens a lot, in particular in rural areas, where a child may be given to the auntie up the road, and the auntie takes care of the child. But the legal adoption is something that the whole process of adoption is something that's really not spoken about much. And maybe that is why persons don't really know how to address an adoptee. It is something that is unknown. And I guess they try to find the right words to use. But I think if the conversation continues, because I think it has started, if it continues, I think it will normalize, because it's as normal as normal can be, if you understand what I'm saying. Your mother seeing you in that container with the towels, it felt normal to her. This little person is my daughter. So it was a normal thing for her. So I think that when we get to that point of normalizing adoption and not seeing it as something that is weird, out of the norm, totally strange, then I think we will get a chance to understand how to interact with each other. And I think it'll probably lessen the sensitivity as well, right? What do you think?
No, absolutely. I agree with you. I think the more we start these discussions, it will definitely open people's perspective to how to address this type of family, because really it's just a type of family. I'm an only child, but as you said, adoption happens in many families. My grandmother, adopted as well. And, she also had some family members who just lived with her. I think almost every, as you said, Jamaican has that kind of story where I lived with an aunt or I lived with a family friend for 5, 6, 10 years, all of my high school life, etc. And some formalize it and some don't. And so, as you said, it's kind of more normal than we think. It's just that it's not spoken about enough, and these types of discussions will definitely assist in taking out this taboo-ness of adoption for sure. I believe it's a beautiful thing. I plan to adopt one day. And I think, if persons have the means and the heart and maybe we want to talk about that as well, because you need support in this newness, because it's not spoken about enough. But if you could, there's a lot of, children out there who need families and need love and adoption.
Well, Stephanie, I can certainly tell just from you that your mother's and your father's heart must have been humongous, because I can just feel that loving energy exuding from you. So I can only imagine that it came from them. So I'm sure that they are lovely people. But
I think they did their best. They did their best, but no, I must say, they really are individually and collectively. I mean, up until my father's passing, my parents were married 30 something years, and they still went on their dates and they still, so I was really raised in a lot of love and openness. And I would hope that I've gotten something from them. I would hope for sure. And even if I don't have the physical attributes of them, I do believe in the nurture part of things. I definitely say things like my mom. There are some people who say we look alike just out of things we say and our mannerisms and things like that. So I hope so. Thanks so much.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
But for sure, I think, Michelle, we're going to be a lot more sensitized to this whole new family, or not a new, but becoming more open and normalizing this family dynamic because of people like you who are willing to, just step out and talk about it like just normal, because this is your family, right? So I love that for sure.
This is me, and I think again I was kind of raised that this is it. This is who you are. Be proud of who you are. When we have generally as people, when we have a sense of who we are, we perform better in life. It's very important, especially in our cultures, oral history and imagine not having that conversation. We need to try and normalize that. Where do I come from? Where did my name come from? Where did this come from? Where did that come from? I think, every child and person wants to know just very basic things about what happened in the family before, and so openness as much as possible. And I was able to ask my mom those questions, and many things she did not know. But at least she was able to say, I don't know. But if you're ever ready, let's try find out, So it's important to just have that dialogue, as scary as it is. And if you don't know, I think, just say you're not sure, you don't know. And that happens in other families too. So it's just a part of family dynamics, I think.
One of the rights that we have is to know who we are, right? So I'm sure there is a large part of you that wants to know some of those answers to some of those questions. But
yes.
how do you and we may never get some of those questions, unfortunately, because in Jamaica, adoptions are closed. So you actually don't have any access to the names of your parents or any information at all. So unfortunately, that also impacts information you may have regarding their health. and I think this is something that needs to be changed with the policy. So if you have a sickler in the family, you're not going to know because you have no access to your history. So what do you do when you go to the doctor? Because one of the first things the doctor says to you is, does your mother have diabetes? Is your mother hypertensive? Blah, blah, blah. How do you respond to the doctor when, I mean, that's just a basic question, right? But that's a question I'm sure you've gotten a couple of times. You know, how do you respond to this total stranger that you're sitting in front of? And they're writing their notes and they say, so Stephanie, tell me, what's your medical history? Does your mother have this? Does your mother have that? How do you respond?
You know, Mish, yeah, it's been a journey. It's really been a journey. And if people only knew, you know, that's why we're having this discussion now. Sometimes it's really difficult, especially I think it was more autopilot when I was younger. Now that I'm older, you know, the age that I am at, where, you know, as a woman, you start going through certain things, whether it's your menstrual cycle and all of those types of things. When you get those questions, you know, and you kind of come up with it's zero, I really don't have any information. And sometimes you know, doctors kind of really push. Because I may explain that, you know, well, I'm adopted, so I don't have that information. Yes, but nothing at all. Do you have it? I did explain that I don't have that information. And, you know, sometimes knowing that everybody else is afforded that, it does really you feel really alone and left out sometimes, you know. From early, I've had to accept my reality. But it's not easy at all. And there's many questions that, as you rightly said, may never be answered. And it does really feel unfair that there's just no possible way of knowing. So as you said, with sickle trait, if two people who have the trait procreate, then that's a challenge. And, you know, you just want to be able to know certain things about your family. I can list in my mom's family, you know, that cancer runs in the family, for example. But I'm not of that bloodline, right? So it's different for me. So whereas, you know, sometimes I was forced, I think when I was a little younger, like in my 20s, I would say about my mother, like as if it relates to me. And then after I've given them all of that, I would say, but I'm adopted. You know, and so I've stopped doing that now. I just say I don't know,
Right.
You know, and really stand firm in that and explain that yes, I know my parents' medical history. However, I am not of the same bloodline, so therefore it wouldn't apply to me. You know, and that's just, yeah, it's unfortunate. It is unfortunate, but we really should look at how we can change that, I think, for the future.
Because if you're saying to the doctor, I don't know, why would they push you? Because that's really just them not understanding what you're saying. Because you already stated it, I don't know.
Yeah.
You need to accept it.
Yeah, I guess again, because it's not spoken of enough, you know, and maybe others have done that where I wouldn't say they pretend. It's just not knowing what to do in that situation. So I would normally speak, oh, my mom has this, and, you know, her brother passed away from cancer, you know, and I'm going through all of this, and really, it doesn't really apply to me. And you just, I guess with age, I just decided, well, wait, no, this doesn't make sense. And so again, the more we open this, hopefully the medical field would look at it differently,
Yes.
You know, in how to gather that information and be sensitive to that, you know. I think it's just lack of just ignorance, you know, just not knowing what to say, how to say it, but we need to remember that there are these types of families, and these, you know, adoptees are people too. And that means if you're catering to us, you have to also cater to us and be sensitive to us too.
Right.
Yeah.
So you had said, Stephanie, that you want to adopt in the future. So is this a process that you have looked at in Jamaica? Is it a difficult process here? Tell us a little bit about that, maybe.
Sure, and I hope I'm not stepping on toes, you know. But to be honest, I started looking at it years ago, and the whole system just turned me off.
Mm.
Turned me off. Um, yeah, and so I've left it there. I have not really taken it much further. Most of my focus has been on taking care of my mom. But I would say that yeah, it's not easy to get information about adoption and how to adopt. Um, and as I think I've explored with doing the show Real Life, that there's not enough support systems that we know of. And so me focusing on taking care of my mom, I don't necessarily want to do that without support and having enough information. But I definitely do want to explore it here in Jamaica. But I don't think we make it as easy to get information. I have a good friend of mine was thinking about adoption as well. And I didn't know this till I started speaking more publicly. She was telling me that I inspired her just based on how my life has been and our friendship and knowing my parents and my family. It inspired her to adopt, and she thinks it's beautiful, and she doesn't think it's taboo. She knows of many other people who are adopted. So that inspired her. But yeah, she told me that, you know, she tried to do some inquiries, and, you know, it took like 3 weeks just to answer a couple of questions. And at the time I was like, you know, okay, let me know since you're further in that process. Let me know, you know, how that goes. But it should be so easy, I think, to call, to find a website. It just feels like, where do I start? It's a little daunting for me at the moment, but I definitely, I think I definitely want to adopt.
I saw where Charles had mentioned the difficulties that she was facing with
Yes.
adopting her. She's a foster mother now, and she so badly wants to legally adopt her son. And she's going through such a difficult time.
Yeah.
There are obviously a lot of parts of the policy that needs to be changed. And I don't think you're stepping on toes at all. I think you're just saying what it is. And I think the process being so difficult will turn people off from really wanting to do this. But at the end of the day, I think adoption is an act of love. And a lot of us, you know, a lot of us can't choose our families, but you are chosen. And I think that's such a beautiful thing, you know. And I love the love that you have from your parents. And I saw the part at the end with you and your mom, and I thought I could literally feel the emotion between both of you. And I'm almost sure your dad was sitting there somewhere, and I'm sure they're proud of you. So you were chosen at 4 days old.
My grandmother used to remind me of that.
You were literally chosen. But then in terms of your profession, that's also something.
Chose me.
It chose you. Again, right. So when we read your bio, I mean, I was moved by what you do in more ways than one. And of course, one of the similarities is the fact that my husband, Chris, is part of the Jamaica Association for the Deaf. Here we have this commonality. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Before you continue, Stephanie, I want to say that deaf awareness is very close to my heart too, because I have a nephew who was born deaf. He couldn't have a cochlear implant or anything. This was in Canada. And so we have traveled that road with him. I think I don't even know how old his name is around now, 29, 30, around that age. But he's a successful deaf realtor in Ontario. So I'm like dying to hear all about that from you.
Oh, isn't that amazing? I met I met a deaf race car driver from Canada a couple of years ago. Yeah, and he was fantastic. He did have a cochlear implant though. So I think that was the first time that I actually met somebody that I knew of that had a cochlear implant, and that was very intriguing. But I think that's very popular in Canada and definitely in more of the first world countries for sure. Yeah. Wow, where do I start? Wow. So in a way, just being within the deaf community, that chose me as well. I kind of always wanted to help people. That's kind of just my heart. So I started wanting to be a social worker, and I think my very first job from graduating my first degree, I was like, okay, sociology, psychology. I'll do social work. I'll just do my master's here, which I really started to explore, started to apply and everything, but was working. Took a break here, you know. Anyway, that break is still happening. But I said I'll take a break here and do my master's in social work. But so in working within communities and the politics and the results-oriented type of person I am, and the politics just wouldn't. It doesn't work. It really doesn't. And I said, you know, I remember one time with a community project I was doing, a shootout in Mountain View, and a shootout happened while I was there doing my homework program and just ensuring everything is okay. And I literally had to, you know, you hear about these things, but I had to go, I mean, I was flat. The children were flat and we were looking at each other lying flat. Wow. And I remember just saying, I have to call my parents. If this is wow, I'm shaking. And I was like, I have to call my parents and, you know, just tell them I love them because I don't know if I'm going to make it out of this. And the kids were like, this is normal, you know, they're like, you know, and it was a big thing. The pastor had to try and get me out, and and I thought, no, this is not for me, you know, but my heart is really into community development. But so I've always wanted to help people, and I used to dance and modern dance and so on. And I saw Jamaica Association for the Deaf one day had, you know, their officer on talking about deaf dance. And me and mommy were like, what? That's not possible. And I said, no, so deaf people, how deaf people can dance? How does that work? And the rest is history. I went there and I was like, I have to be a part of this. I love it. They were dancing, and then I saw sign language and not performing arts, sign language, like people talking and children talking to their parents in sign. And I just never seen anything like that. And then the more I started to volunteer and get involved, the more you know, the more you just have to help them. Because they have a unique need that most people, you know, you just can't really go around that, you know. Incidental here, we take that for granted. But unless they have sign language, they literally don't really have much. Even if you can speak and if you can read, the communication with your family and the parents and that kind of discussion, they don't have that, hardly. Right. And yeah, it just kept choosing me. I kept trying to do different things, and then a job would literally just plop on my lap, and they said, you're the one for the job. And so I just said, all right, I see. But when you realize that the gap is not as wide, I just decided to, okay, how can I really be the change I want to see? You know, many times I'm that type of person, like, why don't you try this? Why don't people do this? Why don't people do that? And then it's like, oh, I'm the people. I'm that person. So I need to try and be the change I want to see. And that's kind of one of my mantras. And so I don't try to limit myself. Whatever I can provide for the deaf, I do, you know, interpreting, because communication access is really important. I mean, the whole driver's license movement, you know, how people treat that. That's when some of what people really think comes out, and it's mind-boggling. But it's important to educate as well. So I offer, you know, classes on deaf culture awareness and sign language. and it doesn't make sense doing the sign language without understanding culture.
Mm-hmm.
Language and culture go hand in hand anyway.
Yes.
And so I'm really, really passionate about that. And yeah, that's that. And I think, again, just as early as possible, I love babies, like meaning 2 to 3 year old is the best time to learn to teach sign. They're so receptive. it's like there's like sponge. And I just really love what I do. It helps me having my own business, take care of my mom. That's the main reason. In addition to, being the change I want to see. So yeah, that's kind of where it started, and it's called PA, Bridging the Gap.
Wow.
And you have a website, right?
We do www.learnjsl.com.
Okay, so we're gonna tune into that.
Okay,
So that's
great. That would be awesome.
That's pretty amazing. And I know another me and the politically correct words. My sister is very passionate about this when referring to deaf people. In Jamaica, it's common too, is that they often refer to deaf people as dumb. And so she is always educating about that. Please stop using that word. So that is.
Yeah, in Jamaica, I think we know where it comes from, and Old English.
Right.
We say deaf and dumb. I think it's really important, the advocacy, we can't have enough to advocate. So please join with me. But the politically correct terms are really deaf or hard of hearing, not even hearing impaired. And if in doubt, ask the deaf person what they would like to be. How do I refer to you? I've met 1 or 2 deaf people who actually say, oh, I'm hearing impaired.
Right.
But I know, as an educator and, being in the deaf community for 15 years, I know that, they don't usually prefer to be called that. And that's okay. That's their choice. Those persons are usually not as immersed in deaf culture as others. But those who are really proud to be deaf, who little use sign language, they don't necessarily speak much. They prefer to be called deaf or hard of hearing. And just for the reason that they're proud of who they are, they accept who they are.
Right.
And hearing impaired gives also, without us knowing or realizing, it gives a kind of something impaired. I'm just deaf. I cannot hear. I have a hearing loss. Those types of things. And many people don't realize that deaf people speak. They really can if they learn how to speak. So it's not that they necessarily can't. It may sound different, but they can speak if they are trained, and if they don't have any other impediments, they really can. So dumb also wouldn't be technically correct. So that's my thoughts on like terminology and deaf culture. It's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating. How I was really impressed with how a lot of deaf persons want to prove themselves, So instead of using it, there are 2 sides, 2 extremes. You have those that are really depressed and really need support psychologically with their mental health and so on. And then you have others who, and the majority of them are, they want to prove something. There's a passion to say that I'm just as good as you. And I really love that about them. As a person who I can be timid at times, I found them not afraid to travel. They travel all over the world. They go to somewhere and they just start signing. They know the person don't understand, and they're just like signing and like, I need help. And they just, a lot of them are just very brave. And I thought, whoa, I like that. So I think just like in cultures, there's a variety of people, and seeing the braver set of deaf people really inspired me, and shows that for the future, other deaf people can do just the same. So whatever I can do to do that, And from that now, I have my dance group of deaf dancers, Power Deaf Dance Company, because I want to give whatever I can. And that's one of my safe places, dance. or used to be, should I say. And it's somewhere you don't have to be judged. You just let it all out in the art of it. And when you don't always have the words, so there's nobody judging how you speak, how you sign, how you just dance. And it saved me with a lot of things that I went through in life. So yeah, we've been doing that for 3 years, and we just pray for the guidance and the support and all of that sponsorship too.
Stephanie, your stories, they leave me almost speechless.
And awestruck.
For sure.
Wow.
There's just one word that I think weaves its way through all that you have said, and that word is love.
For sure.
I think it's the love of your parents, it's the love you received from your family, it's the love that you in turn are sharing and giving to the deaf community, which is just beyond amazing. And it really is incredible sitting here, looking at you, listening to you, feeling that I'm literally feeling it as you're speaking, and I just think the whole world needs to hear,
Sure.
The whole world needs to hear.
I think we might need to have Stephanie on again, because I feel that there's like so much more we can talk to her about.
There's a part 2.
Sure.
Oh, well, this has been amazing. It's so lovely to meet you, virtually and in person as well. And anytime you're ready, I will be back.
For sure. Please let us know if Pa is having any dance shows. We would love to come and see and check it all out.
I most definitely will, for sure. We're doing a lot of internal work at the moment. This pandemic has been really rough on them. Added another layer of isolation. And so right now our focus has been in, the healing part of things before we can really dive back into, our mission and our training. And we'll be doing a lot of yoga, which has been really, really beneficial. I didn't think they would like it. They love it. They absolutely love it. And so we formed a partnership with Kelly's Kelly Yoga, and it's really been working out quite well. So we hope to just continue to heal and to grow. But by next year, for sure, we should have some more offerings for everybody, for the public.
So excited. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for being on. So excited to have you.
Thank you.
Lovely to hear your story.
Thank you so much for having me and providing this opportunity and this platform.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of What the 50. Please show your love and encouragement by sharing, subscribing, and leaving a review wherever you're listening. And don't forget to like and follow us on Instagram, and please join our active Facebook group at What.the50.